Meeting the love of their life, eloping, and getting married is a dream cherished by many teenage girls. Caroline Crouch was no exception. A bright, impressionable 15-year-old high school student, she was captivated by a financially successful 27-year-old pilot named Haralambos Anagnostopoulos, better known as Bobish. With a flair for the dramatic, Bobish even flew his helicopter over her school, sweeping her off her feet. Enamored and believing in the fantasy of a perfect love story, Caroline eloped with him, and the two tied the knot. However, what seemed like a fairy tale romance would soon spiral into a tragedy that shocked and deceived the world. In the early hours of Tuesday, May 11, 2021, at precisely 4:30 a.m. chaos erupted in the suburban neighborhood of Glyka Nera on the outskirts of Athens, Greece. The couple had rented a luxurious two-story maisonette, where their seemingly idyllic life was shattered. Bobish claimed he was jolted awake by three masked intruders who stormed their home. Armed with pistols and speaking with distinct Greek and Albanian accents, the men wasted no time. They overpowered Bobish, binding his hands and feet before blindfolding him with duct tape, rendering him helpless. Their focus quickly shifted to Caroline, a vibrant 19-year-old mother, as their 11-month-old daughter slept nearby. The cries of the baby pierced the night as the intruders ransacked the home, demanding to know where the money was hidden. What appeared to be a robbery turned sinister, culminating in a murder that would haunt Greece and draw international attention. Caroline Crouch was born on July 12, 2001, in Athens to retired engineer David Crouch and Susan Della Cuesta. At the age of 8, Caroline and her family relocated to the picturesque island of Alonissos, a decision born from her parents' deep love for its coastal charm. It was here, surrounded by azure waters and sun-soaked beaches, that Caroline thrived. A natural lover of the sea, she embraced a beachside lifestyle, spending her days immersed in scuba diving and swimming, passions that defined her adventurous spirit. Yet, amidst this idyllic backdrop, she crossed paths with the man who would alter the course of her life. Their love story, which once seemed like a dream, was destined to unravel in the most devastating way imaginable. Bobish first met Caroline during a Good Friday parade in 2017. At the time, Bobish was a successful commercial helicopter pilot, while Caroline was just 15 years old, full of youthful innocence and charm. Despite their significant age difference, the connection between them grew rapidly. 3 years later, on July 15, 2019, the couple exchanged vows in a picturesque ceremony in Portugal, marking the beginning of what they believed would be a lifetime of love and shared dreams. Enjoyed this video? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated with our latest content. If you loved what you saw, give us a like to let us know, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. In the days leading up to the tragedy, Bobish and Caroline had just purchased a plot of land with the vision of building their dream home, a sanctuary for themselves and their infant daughter. To help with the purchase, Caroline's parents had gifted her €50,000, a gesture of immense generosity. For the construction costs, the couple had saved €10,000, which they kept hidden inside their home. In Greece, where trust in banks was low due to the frequent risk of bankruptcy, it was common for people to store significant amounts of cash at home. Caroline and Bobish likely saw this as a practical and secure choice, never imagining the horrors that would unfold on May 11th. That night, their world turned into a nightmare. As intruders stormed into their home, demanding money, fear gripped the young family. Desperate to protect his wife and child, Bobish revealed the unconventional hiding spot for their savings, inside a Monopoly board game box. The intruders tore it open, taking every last euro the couple had painstakingly saved for their dream home. But the nightmare didn't end there. The masked men ransacked the house, moving from room to room like predators on the prowl. They grabbed jewelry and valuables, seemingly insatiable in their greed. Despite having given up all they had, Bobish and Caroline begged for mercy, pleading for their lives and the safety of their daughter. The situation escalated into sheer terror. Bobish, blindfolded and restrained, could hear Caroline's screams as one of the intruders threatened their 11-month-old baby with a firearm. Fueled by desperation, Bobish struggled against his bindings, but the ropes tightened around his neck, cutting off his air and causing him to drift in and out of consciousness. Eventually, he fainted. When Bobish regained consciousness, he found the intruders had fled, leaving behind a scene of devastation. The house was in shambles, drawers overturned, clothing and personal items scattered everywhere. The Monopoly box, now empty, lay among the wreckage. In the suffocating silence, only the heart-wrenching cries of his baby girl filled the air. Summoning what little strength he had, Bobish inched toward his mobile phone. With his hands bound and duct tape covering his mouth, he used his nose to dial emergency services. When the call connected, his muffled cries for help were barely intelligible. All he managed to say was, "Robbers came in," before the call cut off. By the time first responders arrived at 6 a.m., an hour and a half after the attack, the scene inside the house was nothing short of horrific. The living room and kitchen were completely destroyed, drawers emptied, and belongings strewn across every surface. The ripped security camera lay discarded on the couch, symbolizing the chaos and violence that had unfolded within these walls. The camera lay discarded on the couch, its memory card conspicuously missing. From the staircase, a haunting sight greeted the responders, the lifeless body of a white and brown husky puppy, Roxy, who had been cruelly strangled with her own leash. The scene grew even more harrowing as they entered the main bedroom. Bobish was discovered on the floor, bound and gagged. Duct tape covered his eyes and mouth, extending down to his neck, with his hands and feet tightly restrained behind his back. On the bed, face down and motionless, was Caroline Crouch. Beside her, their infant daughter, distraught yet unharmed, clapped her tiny hands and nudged her mother, trying to rouse her. Tragically, Caroline was unresponsive. Emergency responders quickly assessed her pale, lifeless body and confirmed what they feared: Caroline had been murdered. When Bobish was freed from his restraints, his visible shock and despair were palpable as he laid eyes on his wife's lifeless form, the woman he had loved for 5 years. Officers immediately moved to ensure the safety of the infant, while initiating their questioning of Bobish based on his account and the chaotic state of the crime scene. From the details gathered, investigators deduced the involvement of 4 perpetrators, 3 who entered the house and a 4th who kept watch outside. The sequence of events was reconstructed as follows. The intruders approached the house under the cover of darkness, using a dirt road that led to the rear entrance. Unable to break in through the rear door, they removed the security pins from a basement window to gain access. Once inside, they mercilessly killed Roxy, the family's 7-month-old husky, using her own leash. The intruders then made their way to the main bedroom, where Bobish and Caroline were asleep. After ransacking the house, they located the cash hidden inside the Monopoly box and looted jewelry worth thousands. Before fleeing, they smothered Caroline with a pillow, taking her life in a brutal and prolonged assault. Believing Bobish to be dead as he drifted in and out of consciousness, they left the scene, assuming there were no surviving witnesses. Details of Caroline's death revealed a horrifying struggle. The 20-year-old endured a 6-minute-long attack, with bruises across her body indicating a desperate fight for her life. Injuries to her lips and tongue hinted at the possibility of sharp objects being used against her. Despite the brutality, no evidence of sexual assault was found. The investigation uncovered devastating clues. Though the intruders left significant damage throughout the house, they managed to avoid leaving much physical evidence behind. The only item of interest was a hood believed to have fallen during Bobish's struggle with one of the attackers. This hood provided enough detail for Bobish, despite his disoriented state, to give a description of one intruder. A sketch was created, portraying a tall, overweight individual with dark skin, based on his account. Bobish also recalled the weapons used by the assailants, identifying a black pistol and a silver Colt. The criminals managed to escape with €10,000 in cash and jewelry valued at €20,000. Police speculated that the attackers were seasoned professionals, likely observing the family's movements and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Despite their precision, the investigators remained determined to uncover the truth behind this horrifying act of violence. A police spokesperson described the crime as both brutal and senseless, categorizing it as the work of someone with a severe lack of empathy and an intensely antisocial personality. The public was gripped by speculation as investigative details gradually emerged, shedding light on the horrifying murder. A lingering question in everyone's mind was, if robbery was the motive, why was such brutal violence necessary? Theories abounded. Some suggested the intruders might have been under the influence of drugs, unable to control their actions. Others speculated that Caroline, being a black belt in kickboxing, may have resisted and fought back, forcing the intruders to silence her. Another theory proposed that Caroline might have recognized her attackers or stumbled upon their identities, prompting them to act violently to eliminate any witnesses. It was also believed she could have started screaming in alarm when her 11-month-old daughter had a gun pointed at her head. While much of this remained conjecture, investigators were sure of one thing: the attack was premeditated. This conclusion was based on the fact that the intruder seemed to know the couple had money hidden in the house. Believing it to be an inside job, police began questioning people within Bobbish and Caroline's close circle. Alongside these interrogations, security footage from nearby homes and businesses was reviewed. The footage revealed a dark-colored vehicle followed by a motorcycle circling the couple's house on the morning of the murder. 3 days after the tragedy, Caroline Crouch was laid to rest on the serene Greek island of Alonissos, the place her parents had fallen in love with and where Caroline had spent her childhood. At her funeral, Bobbish paid an emotional tribute to his wife, describing himself as incredibly lucky to have met her, luckier still that she loved him, and even luckier that she was the mother of their daughter. Fighting back tears, he lamented that their daughter would grow up without any memories of her mother, adding that Caroline was the joy of his life and would forever live on through their child. While mourners gathered to say goodbye to Caroline, an unexpected development occurred. In northeast Greece, during a routine traffic stop, police pulled over a car near the Bulgarian border. Inside was a 36-year-old Georgian national, later identified as Georgi Karakishvili. Upon inspection, the passport he presented turned out to be a forgery. Georgi was a violent criminal with a history of convictions and was wanted for 12 break-ins committed across Athens over the previous 6 months. What made Georgi a prime suspect was the striking similarity between his modus operandi and the events leading up to Caroline's murder. 3 of his known burglaries had taken place in Bobbish and Caroline's neighborhood. In one December incident, Georgi and 3 accomplices broke into a house through a rear window, just as the intruders had done at Bobbish and Caroline's home. During that break-in, they dragged a female occupant by her hair and threatened to slit her throat, ultimately stealing €10,000 in cash and jewelry. On March 7, just 2 months before Caroline's murder, Georgi's group struck again, tying up an elderly couple, their cleaning lady, and 2 others during a robbery that netted a significant haul of cash and valuables. The chilling similarities between these crimes and the murder of Caroline didn't stop there. Georgi's physical appearance closely matched the sketch created from Bobbish's description of one of the intruders, adding to the mounting evidence against him. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Georgi's history of violent home invasions, his proximity to the crime scene, and his striking resemblance to the described intruder painted him as a likely culprit in the harrowing case of Caroline Crouch's murder. Confident in their findings, the police believed they had their suspect, Georgi Karakishvili. His attempt to flee the country and striking resemblance to the sketch made him the prime target. Arrested and interrogated over 4 grueling days, Georgi was subjected to intense questioning, including physical methods intended to extract answers. Despite sustaining a concussion from these tactics, Georgi remained steadfast in his claims of innocence, repeatedly stating that he had never heard of Caroline Crouch. Enjoyed this video? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated with our latest content. If you loved what you saw, give us a like to let us know, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. As the days wore on, it became clear that the evidence against him was circumstantial at best. No concrete links could tie him to the crime scene, and investigators had to concede they had the wrong man. Georgi was cleared of any involvement in the murder, and the fallout was immediate. 3 officers from the Athens homicide squad were demoted for their mishandling of the investigation. With Georgie out of the picture, the investigation pivoted toward a local Albanian organized crime group. Initially, police compiled a list of 100 potential suspects, later narrowing it down to 10 individuals known to be part of the notorious Red List of criminals. Mugshots of these men were shown to Babiš, though investigators withheld further details. The case dragged on, and frustration began to ripple through the public. In a city already grappling with rising race-related crimes, fear and mistrust deepened. The lack of progress, coupled with scarce leads, led to growing impatience among Athens residents. Even a substantial monetary reward for information went unclaimed, leaving citizens fearful and uncertain about who might become the next victim. Media reports amplified the tension, with experts labeling the case as anything but ordinary. If it had been, they argued, it would have been solved much sooner. Details trickling out from the investigation revealed a disheartening lack of evidence: no DNA, no fingerprints, nothing to solidify a suspect. Caroline's family, however, remained resolute, expressing gratitude for the ongoing pursuit of justice. Babiš, too, was determined to keep the case in the spotlight. Speaking to journalists, he conveyed his wish that no one else should endure the nightmare he was living. Publicly supporting the police efforts, Babiš became the face of the campaign for justice, frequently addressing the media and engaging with supporters on social media. His messages of gratitude and updates on the case garnered widespread attention, keeping Caroline's story alive. A significant breakthrough came 37 days after Caroline's murder. On June 17, during a small memorial service held on Alonissos to honor her memory, attendees noticed detectives discreetly present among the mourners. They waited until the ceremony concluded before approaching Babiš. Speaking in hushed tones, they requested that he accompany them to Athens, explaining they had uncovered new information that required his input. Babiš, unaware of what was to come, agreed without hesitation. Investigators had been tirelessly analyzing leads and re-examining key details from the night of Caroline's death. What they discovered cast doubt on Babiš's version of events. He had claimed the intruders broke in through the basement, but inconsistencies in his account began to raise questions. The investigators were closing in on a chilling revelation that would turn the case on its head. The alleged entry point, a small basement window, presented a glaring inconsistency in Babiš's story. Given the size of the window and the physique of the supposed killer he had described, it was virtually impossible for anyone of that build to have used it. Babiš also claimed the intruders had ransacked the house, yet neighbors reported hearing no such commotion that night. Instead, they only recalled the distressed cries of the couple's puppy. There were no sounds of a struggle, no breaking objects, no cries for help, and no wailing infant. Further undermining Babiš's account was the lack of any physical evidence. The house contained no fingerprints or DNA from the supposed intruders. Investigators also questioned why the alleged attackers would go to the trouble of tying up a grown man while physically confronting a woman instead. Babiš's claim that the intruders removed the memory card from the living room security camera was also debunked. Data from the camera showed that the card had been removed at 1:20 a.m. hours before the intruders were said to have entered the home. Adding to the contradictions was evidence from Caroline's smartwatch. The device recorded her pulse at 3:58 a.m. indicating she was asleep. By 4:05 a.m. her pulse spiked dramatically, reflecting extreme physical or emotional stress. At 4:11 a.m. her heart had stopped, well before the time Babiš claimed the murder occurred. Further scrutiny came from data on Babiš's fitness app. Despite his insistence that he was tied up during the attack, the app recorded movement during the time in question. Police also attempted to replicate Babiš's claim that he used his nose to dial emergency services while bound, but their efforts failed to produce the same results. Investigators uncovered another troubling detail: Caroline had attempted to book a hotel room for herself and her daughter on the night she was killed. A text message sent to a friend revealed she was planning to leave Babiš. This wasn't an isolated incident. When Babiš first met Caroline, he was on holiday in Alonissos. His mother lived on the island and worked as a teacher at Caroline's school. Charismatic, clever, and financially stable, Bobish caught Caroline's attention by flying a helicopter over her school, a grandiose gesture that captured the imagination of the then teenager. Like many young girls, Caroline believed she had found her dream man. She confided in her family, expressing her happiness and excitement. A year and a half later, Bobish proposed. At the time, Caroline was underage, but she turned 18 just 3 days later. The couple quickly eloped, foregoing a traditional Greek wedding filled with family and celebrations. What may have seemed like a romantic act of defiance was, in hindsight, an early attempt by Bobish to isolate her. After their elopement, Caroline and Bobish settled in Glyka Nera. Caroline pursued her college education in Athens, while Bobish continued his career as a pilot. On social media, they appeared to lead a picture-perfect life, sharing moments of love and joy. However, Caroline's private diary painted a far darker picture. In her entries, Caroline often expressed doubt about their relationship. In 2019, she wrote about a particularly serious fight with Bobish, mentioning plans to leave him and stay with her sister. She frequently questioned whether she could continue in the marriage. Over time, Bobish's behavior became increasingly manipulative and controlling. This controlling nature could be traced back to their wedding, which Bobish had orchestrated to cut Caroline off from her support system. Upon their return home, Bobish took control of their finances as the sole breadwinner, while Caroline remained a university student with limited financial independence. Though her mother, Susan, occasionally sent her money, it was never enough to grant Caroline true freedom. The pattern of control, isolation, and manipulation gradually eroded the romantic dream Caroline once believed in, leaving her trapped in a relationship that had turned into a nightmare. Caroline's diary entries painted a heart-wrenching picture of her emotional turmoil. In one entry, she confessed, "I love Bobish so much that I can't leave him, even though this relationship hurts me." Another entry detailed a tearful confrontation with her husband, where she expressed her desire to leave but felt trapped by her pregnancy. "I stayed with him so my daughter would not grow up without her two parents," she wrote, revealing the heartbreaking sacrifices she made for her child. An entry dated July 2020 reflected the depth of her despair. "Today, my little one is a month old. It's also the day I told Bobish I want to leave. I feel awful." The diary also mentioned a house in Athens, located in Halandri, a place tied to her fading dreams of a better future. What had begun as a fairy tale romance for Caroline had deteriorated into an abyss, a dark, consuming void of pain, fear, and isolation. It was an abyss she couldn't escape, one that would eventually claim her life. Adding to the tragic narrative, phone records from hours before her murder revealed a series of combative and heated text exchanges between Caroline and Bobish. The messages, sent while they were in the same house, underscored the growing emotional distance and dysfunction in their relationship. As investigators confronted Bobish with overwhelming evidence of inconsistencies in his initial statements, he became the primary suspect in Caroline's murder. For 8 grueling hours, Bobish was interrogated. Finally, he broke down, but his confession was riddled with fabrications and self-serving justifications. Bobish claimed that the argument began on May 10, the night before Caroline was killed. According to his version, the dispute was centered around their daughter, with Caroline allegedly insisting that she would take the child and leave him. He described this as the breaking point, stating, "My daughter is my whole life," as he attempted to rationalize his actions. Bobish alleged that Caroline became aggressive, throwing their infant daughter into the cot and demanding that he leave the house. He further claimed that she physically attacked him, pushing and punching him in a moment of anger. He described feeling overwhelmed and said his judgment was clouded by the escalating confrontation. Despite his efforts to portray himself as a victim of circumstance, the evidence painted a far more chilling picture of premeditation and manipulation. Investigators saw through his narrative, uncovering the tragic reality of a woman trapped in a relationship that had spiraled into darkness and violence. From that moment, Bobish's judgment became clouded, and his rage took over. In a cold-blooded act of violence, he strangled Caroline, pressing a pillow over her face with his full body weight until she stopped breathing, all in front of their 11-month-old daughter. After the murder, Bobish admitted he briefly contemplated disposing of Caroline's body but quickly realized it wasn't feasible. Instead, a darker plan formed in his mind, to stage a home invasion and shift the blame onto imaginary intruders. To make the scene look convincing, he killed Roxy, the family's 7-month-old husky, as part of the charade. He then placed his infant daughter next to her mother's lifeless body, tied himself up with rope and duct tape, and meticulously staged the house to appear as though it had been ransacked. In a calculated effort to mislead investigators, he crafted a narrative of terror that cast him as a helpless victim. During his confession, Bobish acknowledged that he deserved punishment and owed a profound apology to everyone he had harmed. While admitting his actions were indefensible, he attempted to shift some of the blame onto Caroline, claiming her behavior had made him unstable and pushed him to the brink. Yet, his words rang hollow in the face of the brutal reality: a child now orphaned of her mother, forever denied the chance to know the woman who had loved her unconditionally, all because of the man who was supposed to protect them both. The case, later dubbed "the murder that fooled the world," revealed just how confident Bobish had been in his ability to evade justice. His arrogance blinded him to the glaring evidence he left behind, ultimately unraveling his carefully constructed lies. In May 2022, Bobish was charged and convicted of premeditated murder, obstruction of justice, lying to authorities, and animal abuse. His actions not only destroyed his family but also left a legacy of grief and betrayal, a stark reminder of the depths of human deception and violence. Enjoyed this video? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated with our latest content. If you loved what you saw, give us a like to let us know, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts.